I don't like the word sexist because I think the word we should be using is misogyny. We need to call it what it is and be explicit about where it comes from, which is an undervaluing and an undermining and an internalized bias against women. That's my spicy take for Mother's Day. Down with sexism, call it what it is. It's misogyny.
Well, welcome back to In the Meanwhile. I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
And I'm Nora Kenworthy. And if you've been wondering what time it is on the doomsday clock of late stage capitalism, well, I guess we have an answer for you. It's get in, poppers. We're crowdfunding a budget airline o'clock.
That's right. For those who are not chronically online, and congratulations, first off, if that is you. But you might have missed that the internet has some ideas after Spirit Airlines suddenly shut down last week.
Which, if you ask me, their shutdown proved that if we all just wait long enough, horrible things do sometimes die.
Or do they? Or do they? Because in this case, the internet is trying its best to resurrect the airline with a crowdfunding campaign. Hundreds of thousands of people have since pledged to buy the airline and run it as a co op. I'll say that my one experience with Spirit involved a flight attendant personally addressing the cabin to ask passengers to please not openly drink the carry-on liquor.
Oh my God.
Yeah, enough
That
said.
sounds completely just on character.
Very much so, very much so. Now, look, y'all know I love me some people over profits. However, meme culture zombifying a truly hated brand was honestly not on my bingo card for this year, Nora.
Not on mine either. I do hope that if we crowdfund the airline, we also crowdsource the name for this new airline. Because we all know that the internet will name it something like Planey McPlaneface, which admittedly is actually slightly better than the budget airline I once flew in South Africa, which was called, I kid you not, One Time Airlines.
And I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and guess you only wrote it just the one single time.
Yeah, once was enough. Luckily, I survived.
We're all happy for this. We're all happy for this. Well, I will say what the internet has not been buying this week are tickets to a much swankier event, the Met Gala. It was hosted by everyone's favorite fashionista. No, I'm sorry, supervillain. Of course, I mean Jeff Bezos. The theme this year was Fashion is Art, by which they meant money is influence and everything has a price.
Apparently, I love this. People have been calling Bezos this week Timu Lex Luthor, which definitely tracks. I
Oh,
mean, this
yeah.
guy invented like trash fashion and now is sponsoring an event celebrating fashion as high art. While his wife shows up having, I mean, they paid millions of dollars for this event, and she shows up and basically like a fake satin prom dress or what looked like that.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I will give her this much credit, Nora. I mean, she did actually show up to the red carpet, whereas Jeff Bezos retreated and did not go to the red carpet. He went through the back door because I guess he was, I guess he didn't want to get the cat calls and the hisses and the boos of from the various Amazon warehouse employees that were being projected upon the screens above him on adjacent buildings. But anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, I do gotta say, I think we're getting real close to, like, French Revolution, Marie Antoinette vibes here. You've literally got celebrities dressing up as statues to hide from the throngs of protesters who are outside this event. The activist group, Everyone Hates Elon because, yes, we still hate Elon too, um, played a number of pranks in and around the venue, which I'm sure many people have seen. One of my favorites, though, is this incredible message from Mary Hill.
My name is Mary Hill. I'm a 72-year-old warehouse worker at one of your facilities. When we struggle from paycheck to paycheck, from week to week, really angers me. Because if it weren't for every associate in every Amazon facility, he wouldn't have all those zeros behind his name. Shame on you, Jeff Bezos. The people that need to be being celebrated at the Met Gala are the workers, people like me, We deserve that celebration. We deserve so much more than we're getting. There's power in numbers, and there's more of us than there are of you. Remember, Jeff, ordinary people like myself that helped make you billionaires, if we built it, we can tear it down. Think about that tonight, okay? After that bottle of champagne when you go to bed. We're gonna keep growing, and we're gonna keep building, and we're gonna keep protesting, and we're gonna keep marching, and we're gonna keep fighting this dystopian culture. We're not stopping. We're just getting cranked up. Enjoy your damn gala.
And I believe that video, as you mentioned, Marcus, was, like, literally projected onto the outside of the penthouse where Bezos was getting ready for the event. It's just priceless. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, she actually wasn't scared to, address the public there like some other people. But anyhow, though, because Republicans are reading the room and this economy, as well as the polls, about as well as a kindergartner with a copy of Ulysses, they have now proposed spending 1 billion. Yes, that's with the B, like Dr. Evil says, of taxpayer dollars on Trump's ballroom. Yep, the same one he said would be funded by private donations. That exact same one.
You
No, it
know,
is not going
Marcus, when Americans can't sleep at night because their savings are drained and their gas tanks are empty and they can't afford to see the doctor, I really think what they're worried about is Trump's ballroom not getting the renovations that it needs. I mean, he really does have his hands on the pulse of this nation.
Yeah, I do recall that during the 2024 campaign, Nora, that I kept hearing, just the everyday people saying we need a ballroom. We need a ballroom
Yeah,
in the White House. It wasn't anything
yeah.
about affordability or
Mhm.
housing. Anyhow. Well, and finally, folks, in more local, everyone hates billionaires news, and there's plenty of it. Seattle Children's Hospital reported that sometimes its helicopters cannot land on its helipad, with urgently sick children in them because rich neighbors nearby are restricting their access. But please tell me more about how our new millionaire's tax is depriving us of all the wonderful things that rich people bring to our fine city. Just go ahead. I'll wait. Play the cue the Jeopardy music right now.
Sadly, Marcus, people still seem more concerned about billionaire flight from our city than who can actually get to the hospital when they need it. For listeners who would like a good dose of the much needed people's medicine on the issue of taxing millionaires, I will encourage them to listen to our episode with Representative Brianna Thomas, who brings equal parts honesty and reality checking to discussions of what our billionaire class actually owes the towns that built them.
Absolutely. And speaking of what we owe the folks that nurture us, an appeals court celebrated Mother's Day early by farther restricting access to telemedicine for abortion care. Now, that order has been temporarily halted by the Supreme Court. But folks, this is like remembering to call your mom at 11:53 p.m. on Sunday night. It's too little, too late, and you definitely didn't get her enough flowers.
I mean,
Also, just thank you for that reminder,
yes.
Nora, because now I would have probably called my mom at 11:53 on Sunday night. Anyhow.
And we all would have judged you. No, I mean, like, this is a policy that, like, only trad wives want for Mother's Day, I guess, like, fewer reproductive freedoms and more chores. I It's so wild to me how much Republicans want more babies while at the same time they're cutting childcare subsidies, SNAP benefits, health coverage. I mean, that's not policy, that's like a a sick bit, basically.
Yeah, what's the old saying that, Republicans believe that, life, begins at conception and ends at
And
birth?
ends at birth, yeah.
Yeah, that's not it. So, that's about it. But anyway, I will say this year, folks, folks just need to skip the card and just send a working legislature. And I mean that at the state level, obviously at the federal level, just, you know, quite frankly, just at any level of government. Can we just get politicians that will work for the betterment of society? Is it that much, Nora? Is it
I
asking
mean,
that much?
a mom can dream, Marcus. Um, and, if you're looking around and thinking, "Wow, this country really hates mothers," you're not wrong. I'm gonna put on my public health hat for
Oh
a
my
second and
God.
tell people that the US ranks dead last among its peers for maternal health and mortality statistics, as well as paid parental leave. Norway, which offers women, I think, 86 weeks of
Oh,
paid
wow.
leave. They just had zero maternal deaths in 2022, like zero. They just decided we're not doing that. Like, not this year, Satan. Like, you don't get the moms.
Jeez. You're saying
It's
that like it at some point policy can actually impact people's lives for the better, Nora? Am I gads?
We
This is
do seem to be
huh.
hypothesizing that, Marcus.
Interesting. I no, no, going out on a limb there, Nora. Going out on a limb.
Such
Anyway,
a socialist.
but but in all seriousness, I mean, these statistics show that what we take as normal here in the US is not normal, and it doesn't have to be this way. 80% of our maternal deaths are entirely preventable. And it's not just better medicine that protects mothers, it is indeed, yes, policy.
In America, we choose over and over again to create and uphold policies that hurt moms and, by extension, kids, families, communities. We don't have to live like this. There are smart, affordable policy solutions that can ensure moms and families get the help they need to not just survive, but thrive.
Yeah, and here to help return us to some measure of sanity on these issues is Maggie Humphreys. Maggie is a public policy and government relations expert with over a decade of experience advancing legislative and regulatory priorities, especially for women and families. She played a crucial role in negotiating and implementing Washington's landmark paid family and medical leave program, a nation leading social insurance program that serves over 200,000 Washington employees annually.
She also co led the successful advocacy effort to establish and implement the Working Families Tax Credit, Washington's first earned income tax credit. She's led efforts to pass the Equal Pay and Opportunities Act, the Healthy Starts Act, Washington's capital gains tax, and the Fair Start for Kids Act, the largest investment in childcare and early learning in state history. Basically, if you enjoy anything about being a parent in Washington state, you probably have Maggie to thank for it.
Maggie, thank you so much for joining us on this, what will be, our, I guess, our upcoming Mother's Day weekend. Although, obviously, mothers and women everywhere should be celebrated on more than just one day. But thank you nonetheless for being here. And want to get into it by asking you, you have spent years, decades even, bringing caregiver stories into legislative spaces. So, what for you has been the biggest disconnect between how motherhood is celebrated culturally and how it's supported structurally?
Thank you so much for having me to talk about the beauty and power and uh, challenges and joys of motherhood and caregiving and the sacred work that underpins all of our lives and our communities. And I don't think it'll be breaking news or new news to anyone who's a caregiver in their own life. But here in the United States, we have a massive disconnect between the notion of family values and how we value families. And that, starts and is rooted in a long legacy in this country around undervaluing the value and labor of women. Being a country founded on the enslavement of people and Black people, the undervalue of labor itself and how we've come to depend on the work of women and particularly women of color to hold our caregiving economy together, whether that's our childcare system, our healthcare system, and the unpaid labor of women and families themselves. So we say in this country that we want people to have families, that we believe in families, that we value moms, we value that care, and yet we valuing something means putting investments and money and time to it, and we do very little of that when it comes to caregiving, whether it's being one of the only industrialized countries without any guarantee for maternity or parental leave, being an industrialized country where the maternal mortality is going up, not down, particularly for Black and Indigenous women in this country, or being one of the few countries in the world without any, nationalized infrastructure that's reliable and accessible and affordable for childcare. And so we have a major disconnect in terms of where our public policies are for the values that I think many of our communities and many of us would say that we hold, which is valuing this essential work, but not actually putting the investments and systems in place to do that.
Thank you so much for putting it that way. I think the family values versus valuing families is just a perfect way to describe the disconnect that so many of us feel in our real lives. And, it's fair to say that all of this care labor that is uncompensated and undervalued and unsupported, like it materially and spiritually sucks for a lot of us. Um, so, what does this very sort of extractive economy of care in the United States actually look like in real life for the working families that you're trying to advocate for in our state?
Yeah. Well, here in Washington, if you're not a parent, you might not know this, but childcare costs more than tuition at the University of Washington each year for in-state students. We see, women continue to earn less than white men in this state. We see caregiving for family members that's unpaid. Almost a super majority of those folks are women. So it's women taking care of our aging family members. It's women taking care of our children. It's women doing the impromptu doctor's visits. It's women making, like, holding the system together. Because we don't have a reliable public system in that families can depend on and count on. Um, and that means women being held back in their careers. That means women not working at all. We saw this, in plain as day during the pandemic, where women hemorrhaged out of the workforce because they physically could not be at work while also taking care of kids with childcare and schools closed. And so it's again and again, it's women's labor, women's ability to earn, continue to advance in their careers, continue to save for retirement, looking to build a family safety net for savings or build wealth. That their women are giving that up in order to hold the strings of their family caregiving structure together, without a public system to be able to depend on.
I All this sounds eerily familiar to many of us, but can you help us break down why the answer to that set of problems is a policy answer rather than just an answer of like shifting cultural norms and values?
My former boss and mentor, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, the founder of Moms Rising, often says that if many and many of us are facing the same problem again and again, it's not a personal failure, it's a systems failure. And I think too often, particularly working parents, working caregivers, working moms feel like, why can't I hold this like string of needs together? Why is the feel like the bottom's always collapsing under me? And that's no individual can stitch that system together. Like, just for example, to have childcare, you need to be able to have providers that are want to be in that field and provide that care and build a business. They need to be able to rent spaces that are safe for kids and, meet the standards that we all want for our children to have rich early learning opportunities. They need to be able to hire staff, which means being able to pay their staff a living wage and maybe provide benefits, which are rare in childcare. And they need to be able to have families access their care, which means offering it at a price that families can afford out of their own pocket. And that's just not possible without a massive system that underpins it and addresses those pieces, like livable wages, like access to space and facilities, like having a price that families can afford without who don't access or who don't qualify for subsidy. We don't ask kindergartners on day one to pay tens of thousands of dollars to access their kindergarten classroom, but we absolutely ask that of every parent that doesn't qualify for subsidy to do that when they show up for childcare and preschool. Um, and just like how we have public schools because families alone can't afford private school, but they can't afford public school through public investments, through a system that asks everyone to pay a little to do a lot. And that you socialize that investment in community, in our kids, in the systems that nourish children, that support their workers, that provide dignified, honorable jobs that allow people to retire with dignity. We don't do any of that in childcare. Childcare workers in our state earn less than fast food workers in King County. I know this was a fact point during COVID. I would imagine it still holds true. We pay pet groomers more than we pay childcare workers.
Oh my god.
Um, and yeah, pet group, that's honorable and great work. And I'm glad folks are making a good wage. But the people taking care of our children, doing arguably some of the most sacred work, taking care of our babies when they're still so little, and when many of us have to go back to work, that should be a job that is honored with a living wage, with a guaranteed retirement, and with basic health benefits. Um, I I still am horrified and angry that childcare workers, like many essential workers, just like farm workers and many others, all through the pandemic, worked to take care of kids, to help their parents, whether they were hospital workers, grocery workers, or other essential jobs, to be able to be at work. And they did that with almost no access to healthcare during a pandemic. And we should all be infuriated about that. And yet, here we are years later, with very little progress. We're actually backtracking a lot on childcare investments that were made at the pandemic, and seeing having to fight harder to keep the status quo. And the status quo isn't great.
Yeah, no, it is not. As you said about us backtracking, I mean, there's been so much of it. Not just not just when it comes to family medical care. I do want to talk about some victories. I know we've had a lot of backtracking in various aspects of our society, um, but you actually helped to negotiate Washington's paid family and medical leave program. That was I guess in my opinion, at least, that was a rare example where policy actually caught up to people's needs. So I want to ask you, what made that possible, and what lessons did you draw from that fight that you can potentially share with others?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, paid family and medical leave goes back to the last question that was just asked about why isn't this like, why do we need systems changes to address these things? Paid family and medical leave is really expensive for businesses to provide. It's why it was such a lucrative offering at big tech companies like Microsoft and Google. They got lots of press in like the 2012 onward era about these incredible maternity leave benefits that were unheard of. And the reason those, one of the reasons those haven't been the norm is they are expensive to do. You're covering out the wages of a worker while they're out, and backfilling that position as well. And in the work that we did in building up to paid family and medical leave, some of the fiercest advocates were small business owners who said, we like would love to be able to provide paid leave for our employees, but as a small business, it is so expensive. And we've looked at these temporary disability insurance policies that are out there. We could never afford them. And we also could never afford to pay someone's full wage while they're out for 4 months, but like we would really like to. Um, and that's the beauty of a social insurance program, is when everyone is paying into a program, including the employees at small businesses are able to offer this life-changing benefit and not lose workers to big corporations who can't afford these other products that are out of market for small employers and for mom and pop shops. Paid family and medical leave is such a victory for not just this state, but the states that followed, including Oregon and Massachusetts. And we showed the country what it looks like to build a paid leave program from scratch. We didn't have a legacy program that we were building on, like states like California and New York had. And we showed what it looked like to really build a benefit that was useful to workers. So, unlike other states, we looked at what's a living wage benefit. A lot of other states at the time had programs that were like they would pay you back 2/3 of your normal weekly wage. who can live on 2/3 of minimum wage. You're never going to take the leave. And other states had, maybe a higher wage, but they also only offered a few weeks of leave. Anyone who has ever given birth to a child knows where your body's at just a few weeks after giving birth. You're in no place to go back to work. And you're also, if you have a partner or family in your life helping care for you and that baby, you need them too, as well, for both your own health and to support with the baby. And so we were able to build a program with a meaningful length of leave at 16 weeks, 18 if you have a pregnancy complication. And one of the things I learned so much from those years and years of work. First and foremost, from the women who'd been leading on that issue in this space for a very long time, well before me, including Dr. Marilyn Watkins, who I know, Marcus, you've worked with in the past, as a community leader, someone who's written a lot about these issues, as well as the Washington statewide labor movement and the power of that, of working with union members and community groups to um, uplift the need for this benefit. Sadly, to have to uplift the horrible decisions and impossible choices so many families and caregivers have been forced into without access to it, and the power of a moment. So we passed paid family medical leave right on the heels of passing statewide paid sick and safe leave. And when we passed statewide paid sick and safe leave in 2016, the same night that the country elected Trump the first time, Washington state passed universal paid sick and safe leave and raised the minimum wage by nearly 60%. It was a runaway victory. And while paid sick and safe leave is very popular, paid family and medical leave makes paid sick and safe leave look like the much less loved child. Just to say, like, people love paid family and medical leave because everyone has a story or an experience where they've needed it or didn't have it. One thing I realized is at those tables is the power and the importance of stories in terms of what actually policy needs to look like. And if you start centered on that, into who's going to be able to take this benefit if it's 2/3 of their weekly wage and who's not, who's that mom from Longview that we talked to who's self-employed and can't afford to pay the premium both as an employer and an employee, like many self-employed folks do. Who's that parent who had a NICU baby and burned through all their protected leave before they even left the hospital? So, what does a meaningful length of leave look like for them? And so on and so forth. And we were able to bring those stories into the room, as we were pushing this policy forward, not just to anchor our conversation and back and forth in the values of where we stood, but also to directly inform the policy as to where we landed.
I want to invite you to um, share maybe a story from a parent or a caregiver that really has stayed with you and changed how you approach this work more globally, if you have one.
I've been so honored in organizing to hear and carry a lot of caregiver stories. Some of them are the highest highs and greatest joys of their lives, and it's so wonderful to celebrate those with them. And some of them are some of the worst things that have ever happened to them and their families. And uh, it's a vulnerability and an intimacy that I think every organizer strives to earn, because it's an honor and something you have to earn, and hold in accountability to. So I'm it's a tall order to ask people to share again and again some of the hardest things that they've managed in order to change systems. And it's something that has to be done really with a sacred approach that it deserves. And I have seen again and again those stories change the direction and destiny of public policy and of what is possible in this state. Um, I don't want to share. I again, I've been honored to hold those stories, but they're not mine to share. And I wanted to share a story from my own life that really sparked my work in this particular space. So my mom's a nurse, a hospital nurse, and as a daughter and a nurse, my grandparents' care as I got older kind of naturally fell to her. So we spent many, many years as a family waking up at 5 in the morning to get to daycare by 6, so my mom could get to the hospital by 7 to start her 12-hour shift, just to get picked up from childcare at 8. And then she started her second job, which was taking care of my grandma and grandpa, going to their house to help with cleaning or setting up the meds or talking about the doctor's appointments the next day, holding my grandma's hand through chemo, and then supporting my grandpa as we kind of grappled with his realizing how deep in Alzheimer's he was at the same time that my grandma was going through treatment for cancer. My mom was an incredible caregiver to her parents, and it was a job that she wanted to do. Who was better suited to take care of them than their daughter and their family? But it was a huge sacrifice for her and for our family in terms of the late nights and early mornings that it took. And when my grandma was finally towards the end of her life, and my mom wanted to take FMLA to be able to be with my grandma in those final weeks, she was denied FMLA from a job that she'd been at for over a decade because she had too many on-call hours that didn't count towards the minimum hours worked requirement. So even though she'd been on call all those times, she had to be 30 minutes from the hospital. We still had to go to childcare. She had taken those on-call shifts so that she could go, do some extra cleaning, make some extra meals for my grandma or grandpa, help them with their meds and things like that. And at the time that she needed just a little bit of time to be with my grandma in this most vulnerable moment, she wasn't able to. And like every mom out there and a lot of women, she made it work. And she, managed to hold the caregiving, hold the support, hold the job. But there is such an indignity in her own employer, a religious employer, denying her the right to take leave from work to be with her mom and with her family in this most important time. So you can say when I was later early in my career and learned about paid family and medical leave, well, I became pretty evangelical about it and about the need for it and the ability to solve these problems that every family is going to experience. Everyone's going to need surgery, everyone's going to have a sick family member. Everyone's going to have something happen in their life, whether it's to them or someone they love, where we should have the ability and the dignity to be with our family when most needed. Something that I was thrilled to see happen when we were finalizing our Washington State paid family medical leave program is that on-call hours now count towards qualifying. So what happened to my mom and what could happen to other folks who work on-call hours won't happen again, at least in Washington State.
Yeah, well, Maggie, I will say you are definitely our favorite type of evangelical on this show here. Uh, that said, become aware of a conversation that's kind of been happening and ongoing in the I don't want to say manosphere, but certainly more uh, masculine centered podcast space. This conversation about paternity leave and fatherhood. And what I've seen is this sort of shift in some ways of how caregiving is treated. Um, going from a gendered one, if you will, to a shared responsibility. And so I kind of want to ask you, what do you, th- what evolution, types of evolution, do you think we're seeing in society, both culturally and economically, when man are when some men are fully embracing stepping into caregiver roles, and then you have others who are essentially saying, oh, these roles are are do not map on with what with what their ideas, if you will, of masculinity are.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a bright spot in the last few years. to be clear, the bright spot being men doing caregiving, not the manosphere. Uh,
Right, right. Understood. Yes.
but yeah, but men, particularly millennial men, are spending record amounts of time with their children. They are spending unprecedented amounts of time with newborns. We see it's something as simple as seeing dads walking around the park with their babies strapped to their chest. I mean, that is something that a lot of us would never see our own fathers do. And Washington State's paid leave program actually has some incredible data about this. We see women are absolutely the number one users of paid leave, but we're also seeing year over year increases in the amount of men taking family leave. That's leave to take care of family. And we're seeing a huge number of men that much more than I think many of us expected. Not just taking parental leave to take care of their newborn or newly adopted children, but taking leave to take care of their own family members too. So I just think this is, and my hope and dream is that this is just the start of these new norms for our sons and for our brothers and how they show up in family. Taking care of the cousins, taking care of the nieces and nephews and nibblings, helping take care of mom. To all my friends out there who have sisters, please don't let your sister be the only one taking care of mom and
Yes.
dad. It's such important and hard family work. And I think we're just at the beginning, especially with systems that say, we're going to help you protect your job. We're going to make sure you get paid. We're going to normalize men taking time to do this. I think we're just going to continue to see that as long as we continue to have systems that allow for it. If we give in to threats of undoing these systems, going back on paid leave, or going back on job protection standards, or going back on the work we've done on childcare, we're going to revert back right to where we know it's going to go, and that's back into the laps and arms of women to do the work and pick up the pieces.
I so appreciate you saying that. It really does feel like the policy really helps shift the norms sometimes. Um, I remember during the pandemic, Dr. Jessica Calarco had this very famous tweet that other countries have safety nets and the United States has women. Um, you have helped pass a number of major policy wins here in Washington state that have helped to chip away at that reality, right? And make it a little bit more equitable. Um, I guess I want to ask you, like, what have you learned from those wins about the political calculus of trying to convince voters and, more importantly, legislators that safety net care systems are a good thing and a good economic reality for all of us?
I think what I've learned most from that work is that the unknown is really scary. And that seems obvious, but in public policy, it is front and center, especially with a lot of lawmakers and the agencies and state workers or city workers, whoever it is that you're asking to stand up something new and different and untested. That's scary. It's a big uphold, undertaking, and it is possible to get through that uncertainty with things like community partners to help tell the story of why it's needed, outside experts to help bring in the data and information and research to show how it can be done, working with uh, our agency partners who were asking to do big, bold things, to show that we're going to be part of making this a success. We worked shoulder to shoulder alongside many of our partners to help ESD implement paid family and medical leave, because we knew it would be a huge undertaking. And to be part of kind of making what was in the collective imagination into a reality, but in a way that also didn't leave behind families and create a system so complicated and so wrangled that it was impossible to navigate. Um, the other thing I've learned is that these things take time. And I know people hate that. I know I hate hearing that. Um, but slowly, ever so slowly, they happen. And sometimes they happen in a big way, and you would never know it. Like paid family and medical leave passing in 2017 was not what I had on my bingo card. And the bright moment of opportunity came. I would never have guessed that Washington State would have passed a millionaire's tax in just this year. And yet here we are about to rewrite almost 100 years of tax law. These things take time and we have to stay in the fight. So, whether it's working year over year to get a new tax credit with the direct cash payments to working families and helping state lawmakers and DOR understand what it would mean for them to send checks to members of the public, because we don't do that in Washington. We don't have a state tax system that has a relationship with workers. What does that look like? Well, let's take the time to figure that out. Let's take the time to make it less scary. Let's help you show that we're partners in your own success. And let's also always keep in mind every minute longer that we're going, here are the people who are being left behind. Here are the people who are in this right now and need this support, need this program, need this change to childcare policy and how it works. Holding that reality is really hard. And I think you have to learn to live in that liminal space of both holding the possibility of quick progress and doing the day to day work to keep making it more visible and tangible to whether it's the lawmakers, agencies, community members, coalition members, to bring it together. So I guess standing in that liminal space is the thing I've learned the most, because I know we can and will get there. It just being okay with that time. It's hard, but it's what keeps it going too.
So I was listening to legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality to describe how systems like racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia overlap and shape people's lived experiences all at once. Much of your work sits at that intersection of gender, race, and power, especially given that childcare workers are disproportionately women of color. So, in your opinion, what does a truly equitable care economy actually look like in practice?
Childcare workers, at least in Washington, are also disproportionately immigrant women. And we saw in just December with the white supremacist attacks on Somali providers, in particular in Minnesota, that quickly came right here to Washington as well. And the storm of racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and uh, in that the storm of that coming to the yards of the front yards of women in their homes taking care of babies with gun yielding men standing on their front lawns. It's no coincidence that white supremacists are focusing on an industry that is disproportionately uh, represented by women of color and disproportionately employs immigrant women as well. Um, if we were to build this system in our daydreams to be a perfect system that is the system that we all want our kids to grow up in, that we want for the women in our lives who are childcare providers, that we want for our community and our economy, I think it starts with making childcare work a job and a career that women can stay in, that women are valued in, with what they're paid, with what they have access to for a dignified retirement, with healthcare benefits, with the right to a union, and so much more. And then it goes to who can access childcare. We know that like 90% of the brain develops by the time a kiddo is 5. So children who have access to early learning and children who do not have vastly different outcomes in education. And those are years that you just don't get back for a kiddo. And so that starts with who can access childcare. Well, it starts with making it affordable, making it sure that it runs on the hours that work for families. If your parents work night shifts, where do you go? If your parents work retail and you have to be in care until 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. or what have you, where do you get childcare and early learning? And if you have a childcare that won't take you before 9 a.m., well, that eliminates a lot of families from being able to even access your care. And that's before you're talking about how much it costs and who can qualify for subsidy and what the work requirements are for subsidy. In Washington state, you can be a student parent if you go to community college, but if you want to go and get your bachelor's degree, too bad, so sad. You have to also work in order to in order to qualify for childcare subsidy. And so having a system that is founded on dignified labor, valued labor of childcare workers, and honoring the work that they do, and expanding outward to ensure that every family has a universal right to early learning and early education, and that is inclusive and culturally relevant, that fosters home languages, that fosters community connection and cultural connection, that also is accessible for families with kids with disabilities and special needs. That's a hugely underserved community in our state. Um, that system is yeah, that's what that system looks like to me. And it looks, and then at those are the really important parts, and then it looks like things like not having childcare fall out from under you because it closes. You get a notice that the center's closing next week, or that the childcare disappears in the summer, and parents have to put together this web work of trying to pretend that they're not parents for 3 months while childcare is closed. And it looks like workers being able to go to work reliably. It looks like nurses not having to miss shifts. It looks like uh, you know, uh, grocery workers being able to know that they can make their shift and that their kiddo is safe and cared for. It looks like an economy and a community that just works, and that you have an ease and a dignity in your own work when your family is cared for and you know that they're safe and that they're learning and doing well.
Yeah, amen to all of that. I'm sure I'm not alone in wanting to give you a little magic policy wand. And if we did, Maggie, give you such a magic policy wand to pass one transformative policy tomorrow for our country, I know it's hard to pick favorites, but what's top of your list to change?
I hated this question when I saw it because it's impossible to it's impossible to pick. Um, I mean, yeah, I find it impossible to pick, but I'm just gonna go with yeah. If I could overnight fix one big system, I think I would choose childcare because I think it touches just about every other part of people's lives. Like having a and not just having the word universal childcare is said a lot, and that can mean a lot of different things. And for me, when I say fixed childcare or a system that works, it's something that's not it's a system that is truly meeting communities and families exactly where they're at, and that is reflective of their own community, their own family, that is meeting, the needs of their child, that is employing, providing family wage, dignified jobs. That helps folks go to school if they want to. That helps folks open businesses. That is meeting the need, every part of the needs. Like if we could fix that overnight, I mean, anyone who wanted to go back to school and get their degree would be able to, even
Yeah.
if they're a parent. You'd have folks who want to do apprentices or work in the trades and have to be on site for at 4 a.m. to start work. They'd be able to do their job and know that their kids are cared for as well. And we'd have just an incredible pathway into work that is so noble and so important for anyone who wants to do it, whether they're a woman or a man, or anyone who wants to do the noble work of caregiving, knowing that they can feel called to that and do it with honor and with dignity, that it's an actual job that will support them, their families, and their loved ones. I think that'd be a pretty transformative change overnight for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, and I it always surprises me in this country how little we value childcare providers, because if you ask any parent what they are most grateful for as a parent, they're like, "My childcare providers, they save my bacon every single day," and that was
Totally.
especially true during the pandemic. I work with a lot of nurses and doctors who would would like literally tear up talking about the people who are keeping their kids safe as they were doing these essential jobs. And
Yeah.
it's just crazy to me that we haven't figured out a way to make that dignified and accessible.
Yeah. I think a huge part of that starts with unionization. And there's probably other takes on that, but I think the right to a union in Washington State, licensed family home providers are eligible. They're part of the SEIU 925, and can be a part of that union. and are covered by a collective bargaining agreement. And I think until we see that right to bargain and those protections across the entire sector, uh, we'll just continue to see the work of women of color, and the work particularly of immigrant women exploited in the system that does not value their labor and does not value their work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of not valuing women and their decisions, Mifepriston was in the news this week. Known colloquially, right, as the abortion pill, and so I want to ask you, Maggie, because you've spoken about bodily autonomy and the increasing control over pregnant people's decisions and bodies. Can you just talk about how that fight connects to both economic justice and to caregiving?
Yeah, I mean, all these issues are so connected. We almost had a maternity leave system passed under I think it was Eisenhower, but they ended up not going forward with it because it was gonna women would go into the workplace. Like all these policies and all these system failures are about controlling. Like they're about maintaining control over what families should be, what women should be, where they should be. Um, Having a child is one of the leading causes of poverty spells for families and workers. And so when you take away the ability to control when or if someone has a child, I mean, you're taking away their ability. You're almost condemning someone to poverty if they're not already there, and also if they don't have family support to manage and support a child. We don't have any as we were talking about earlier, like, there are no systems to catch you if you have a kiddo and you need to pay for care, and you need to pay for clothes, you need to pay for diapers. We have little systems and little fixes along the way. Good luck navigating them. Good luck them being there as long as you need them. And so there is, as you said earlier, like, we don't have safety nets in America. We have women. Um, and so if you look at whether it's starting with controlling, when or if someone becomes a parent, and then you look at a system of childcare that essentially pushes women out of the workforce if they do become a parent in order to afford care or manage it. And then going forward into systems where women are catching the caregiving for families, and again making those decisions to leave work or to reduce their work because of it. All this is about controlling, women's own autonomy for their lives, for their ability to support themselves, to be financially independent. All these issues, I think, they're so intersected with one another and come down to whether or not we want women to have control as to their own livelihood, their own freedom, and their ability to live with a basic amount of dignity and self-independence. And there's been, a long history of both legal and cultural practices of that not being something that we want for women in this country. And there's a long legacy of it's not coincidence that childcare is so undervalued when this country was founded on slavery, and particularly enslaved Black women caring for white people's children. And all of this is so interconnected to control of women's bodies, of women's independence, of women's freedom, and all people's freedom. It's not a coincidence to continue to see those levers of on reproductive health be used in this moment. And we know that this is just the start, and we'll continue to see more attacks on the other systems that underpin women's independence and women's liberation, whether that's childcare, whether that's paid leave, whether that's immigration, whether that's voting access to voting. Like, God forbid you changed your name when you got married, you're not going to be able to vote this year. All these things are so connected.
Well, I think we have a very long list of things that women actually want for Mother's Day now.
Maggie, just thank you so very much for your wisdom and your insights. And, I really do hope that a ton of people will take it to heart.
Thanks. Can I say one spicy thing that you guys can totally cut out, but it's my spicy take on
Of
Mother's
course.
Day? If I had a TED Talk, it would be about how I don't like the word sexist because I think the word we should be using is misogyny. We sexist is something that I find people are not afraid to be labeled as, like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that was a little sexist." But what's underpinning sexism is misogyny, and it is internalized. Like, I know a lot of amazing men who, identify as feminists, and they do things that are absolutely misogynistic. And I think we need to call it what it is, and be explicit about where it comes from, which is an undervaluing and an undermining and an internalized bias against women.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's my spicy take for Mother's Day. Down with sexism, call it what it is. It's misogyny.
I
Yes.
I think we just got our title for the episode here. So anyway, no. Maggie Humphreys, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, Nora, I will say, not to sound like, David French, the New York Times columnist, who all of a
Don't
sudden
sound like him, please.
discovered racism, after after he adopted his daughter from Ethiopia. Um, I I'm sort of in my other than this podcast, you might call me a sort of a glorified stay-at-home stepdad, and so um I'm someone who has, been doing just taking on a little bit more of the caretaking duties in my family unit because my partner has a job that is extremely demanding with the city of Seattle, and it is actually the breadwinner in our home. I'm not ashamed to
Woo woo.
admit, but I will say I was talking to another friend the other day. He's somebody who also has caretaking duties in his family, and what Maggie said earlier kind of struck me just as the fact that even with all this sort of backlash and toxicity from the quote unquote manosphere, there are people who I think are waking up to just how critical and crucial caretaking work is in our society, and in the fact that it isn't auxiliary to some other economy. As Maggie again alluded to, we live in a very patriarchal um, society that is steeped in misogyny. And, it seems that that work, quote unquote, doesn't count, even though it is some of the most important work that anyone can do. I do hope that maybe there will continue to be more of a groundswell recognition that we need to have just better policies that truly do incorporate, what is the lived reality of so many families, of so many people
Yeah.
within our country.
Yeah. I mean, and I was thinking as we were talking to about how multi-generational that care labor is too. I mean, I think you've talked in the past about how your mom helps, elder caregivers in a lot of her work. All of us are carrying these undue burdens. I mean, it's particularly bad when you're in that kind of sandwich generation with like kids of your own and aging parents, but we also have aging parents in this society caring for young people, and all of us are carrying too much. So yeah, I really see the work that she's done as a really crucial step towards reshaping our culture as well as the capacities that we all have here in Washington state. So I'm really grateful to her.
Absolutely. Well, with that, shall we go ahead and spread the joy that we
Let's do
experienced this week?
it.
Um, Mine actually circles back to something that we mentioned earlier this episode. Mary, who is a 72-year-old warehouse Amazon worker, and one of the things she said at the end of her address was that there are more of us, meaning more people who actually give a damn about the
Yep.
society, who don't want to live in in a vastly unequal society, who want to make sure that people's basic needs are met, than there are people who want to concentrate as many resources as they can, and essentially, just be able to do whatever they want to in terms of also concentrating power and where they direct their power and direct their resources. And so I think it's just a good reminder for all of us, right? That I know sometimes our world can look and feel extremely bleak, but there truly are more of us than there are of them. And I think the more that we can recognize that, wake up to that, and also continue to say that, I think the more and more that people recognize that, the more we can actually experience a critical mass of folks wanting to transform and shift this society around. So
Yeah. Yeah. I also like how she was like, "I hope you think about this as you go to sleep tonight, Jeffrey."
yeah. Maybe he'll have that crisis of conscience. It's or something. I don't know. He'll wake up like Mr. Scrooge or something. Who knows? Who knows? I'm not holding my breath, but you never know, folks. You never know.
Well, I can't believe I'm actually saying this because I am very much a book nerd and not a team sports player, Marcus.
What?
I
No.
know. I know. But I I recently started learning a new sport, which has brought me kind of
Oh.
a lot of joy. I I signed up for the adult learn to row crew classes.
Oh my goodness.
Which
Okay.
are like okay, I just wanna highlight our tax dollars for a second here. Like, this is, like, Seattle, like, city parks and rec classes that for, like, $100, you get to, like, sit in a really fancy cruise shell on, like, a beautiful park in our city and be taught by, like, master's level, like, I don't know what they call them, like, crew people, and clearly I've learned the
Very specific
lingo.
term.
Yeah,
Yes. Very specific term.
uh and they just, like, send you out in these boats, and you're like, "Nobody knows what we're doing here," and they just put us in this, like, $50,000, like, 8-person boat, and they're you're just going, but what I kind of have loved about this experience so far is how you can get 8 people who don't know each other at all from this city, um, and you can tell them something like, "Get this boat the size of a building out of this warehouse and into the water without dropping it," and it actually happens. And it's, like, kind of this extraordinary microcosm of what communities can do, like,
Mhm.
that we actually are primed to do things together with other people and that, like, we know how to do that, and I think so much in our modern life, we forget that we actually know how to, like, work as coordinated units and, like, solve hard
Yes.
problems and, like, figure stuff out, and every time we pull a boat out of this warehouse and, like, carry it to the water and place it gently on the water without anyone falling in, um, I'm just, like, reminded of, like, community power in this really cheesy way.
It is
So
a great metaphor. It is a
I
great
am
metaphor.
not sure I'm learning much about crew, but I am appreciating the human camaraderie of it.
I am glad you are. You're going to have to keep us. You're going to have to keep the listeners abreast about the developments as you
Yeah.
make progress, Nora. So
Yeah, I mean, from here straight to the Windermere Cup, it's like a straight line for me. So
I will follow your exploits with great interest. That is awesome, though. Seriously. Oh my goodness. Well, shall we go ahead and sign off for the day?
Yes. Oh, well, folks, if you are starting to wonder how a $10 million party celebrating art and a country that ranks dead last in keeping mothers alive are somehow connected, you're not alone, and you're also not paranoid.
Not at all. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but what they forget to mention is that the village is underfunded, the GoFundMe is at 43%, and someone's working a second job with no benefits just to keep the lights on. So, massive thanks to Maggie Humphreys for actually fighting that reality, not just acknowledging it on a LinkedIn post, but doing the work to make sure people get the support they genuinely need.
And for reminding us that affordable childcare is not, in fact, a radical leftist fever dream. It's literally basic math that this country refuses to compute. Enormous thanks as well to our producer, Jessica Partnow, who keeps this show alive with limited credit and maximum competence. So basically, she's our work mom.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Jessica. And thanks as well to Ahama Luo, whose music is basically the only reason we haven't been canceled for being too depressing.
This podcast is proudly not underwritten by anyone who has ever referred to a $100,000 ticket as accessible. We run on listener support, righteous indignation, and whatever's left of our faith in democracy. So very little, folks. Head to inthemeanwhilepodcast.com to subscribe or donate. Tell your friends, tell your mom she's been through enough. She deserves great content, folks.
You can find us Wednesdays at 5 on KVRU or wherever you stream podcasts. Call your mom, take care of yourselves, and remember, Norway decided 0 maternal deaths was a reasonable goal. We're just saying. I'm just saying. The bar is on the floor, and somehow we are still limboing underneath it.
Aren't we? Jesus. And seriously, get out there and vote like you love your mom a lot. New episodes drop every Friday. And until then, we'll see you in the meanwhile.